is, I reckon.
Of course, we'll grab the field first.
Well, Kenny, what do you reckon?
She's lucky she's got the same time, so hold you all the way. No, I'll wait a minute.
Actually, we're in trouble now that I thought about it.
We're going to get some more.
Women played in building Australia. They launched the Australian Pioneer Women's Campaign at an evening at the Homestead held at the Regent Hotel in Sydney. And it was during that evening that I had the idea that it would have so much more meaning to have such an evening on a real cattle station in the Kimberley.
On the hill, the houses on the busy streets where life was never still, the pleasures of the city and the friends they cherished best, for love they faced the wilderness, the women of the West, Wheels, or the creek of wagon chain, or the everlasting sameness of the never-ending plains.
It's a great pleasure, and I feel a compliment to have been asked to welcome you all here today and to say a few words about the significance of this occasion. I'm afraid without reading notes, I would be intent to ramble, as my association with the Hall of Fame goes back to its pipe dream days in the earliest. To begin with, I would like to thank particularly all those responsible at the Australian Stockmen's Hall of Fame. It has become what...
Church, when he turned to me and said, "You're the missus now," I looked at him and said, "Oh, my dearest, I do hate that expression. I'm your wife, not your missus." He just looked at me and shrugged his shoulders and said, "Out from where we come from, they'll call you the missus, and you'll get to like it because it's rather special." It took us a week of travelling before we finally arrived at the cattle station. We were covered in red telephone, no radio, no newspaper. The nearest town was over 300 miles, and the closest neighbour was 70 miles to the east. I wanted to cry. I wanted to go home, but I loved that man. So I asked him where the broom was. I started a garden, and when the drought was on, the water was scarce, so I saved up all the washing up water and I put it on the flower garden. You can't imagine what my flowers were like. Whenever there was a wedding or a christening or a funeral, you'd always know where the roses had come from. It was my little touch of the south. Our home was nothing fancy, but it wasn't a humpy or a tent either. It was made out of galvanized iron and wood, so we were pretty lucky. I painted the walls and I put rugs on the floors. I unpacked all of my glory box and I put the linen and lace all over. And very soon it started to look like home. My eyes are quite bad now. I guess that's why I have to wear glasses. I didn't know anything about cattle or horses or driving tractors or fixing engines. Sometimes I felt such a fool. How would you like to walk into a machinery shop and ask a man for a male fitting for a half-inch female end, or 2 nipples to match a gasket. I learned to make salt beef and damper. I learned to stitch up the horses and the dogs, plus a few ringers. And I also planted a great big vegetable garden. You can only eat so much beef, you know. My first baby was born on Victory Day during the war. The town got so drunk they forgot to turn on the generator, so there was no light. The next day, the doctor said that we were the only 2 in town who didn't have a hangover. When the big droughts came, we walked the verandas night after night, watching and waiting for the big storms, hoping one would come our way. But after a while, the lightning faded, and then there was nothing. We sold off half the mob that year, and my husband took the breeders away, and he was on the road in Queensland with them for nearly 2 whole years. I remember the dust storms that blew in day after day, and the rat plague that came from nowhere in the middle of the night. They ate up all of our shoes, even the satin slippers I was married in. I walked around all day scheming how to get even. Then I made up this great big stew of cement and flour, and we shoveled them out by the drumload the next day. The kids and I were looked after by an old stockman called Charlie and 2 Aboriginal house girls called Nellie and Janie. I can't tell you what friends they were to me. They took me on long walks and taught me to fish and track. I could even tell my way home by the stars. After a while, I started to see the land through a different set of eyes. There were no shops or fancy restaurants, but there were other pleasures. For instance, the first storm of the season after you've slogged out a long dry. The whole family would stand on the veranda yelling, "Send her down, Huey!" And we'd all run out into the rain and dance and hug each other. I sent my children away to boarding school when they were 10. It wrenched the heart out of me, but I wanted them to have a good education. One of them has come back onto the land, and the rest have good jobs in the city. They have nice soft hands, not like mine, but I never let the standard slip. One wet season, when the rivers were still up, we had to cross over the river by boat, and when we got to the other side, I'd tidy up the kids, wash their faces, and I'd wash my own feet in a bucket of water, put on my stockings and shoes, and off we'd go into town. You really felt as if you were part of it all out here, something that was real and good. Every new dam, each road, each house, each fence, it opened it up for the future generation. But the funny part is, when I first came into this country, it scared the living daylights out of me. And now, I want my bones put down here, because I don't belong anywhere else. I'm the missus, and I'll stay.
Born teachers, some are made teachers, and some are just teachers in the bush. I always wanted to teach, even when I was a young girl, doing tricks on the headmistress, or sneaking a cigarette down the back. There's always something decent about teaching, helping someone get a chance, making the world a better place. My first teaching job was in the small town in the wheat belt. The outhouse had blown down before I got there. Apparently they wanted to see what I would do. The teacher before me had burst into tears and caught the last train out. Well, I could see this was no time for the vapours, so I said, "Where do you all go then, when you want to go?" "Ah, down the creek behind the tree, miss." "Well," I said, "I'll be seeing you down there, won't I?" The outhouse was built the very next day. In my next teaching position, I had to live with an elderly couple, and my bed was on the veranda. One morning I woke and there were 5 emus staring at me, this far away from my face. I thought, good grief, they're going to peck my eyes out. So I shut them, sat bolt upright, and screamed. Well, the old farmer came shuffling out to see what all the fuss was about. He looked at me and said, "They're only curious. They only want to know what the new teacher looks like. No different to any other bloke around here." I grew to love that place. I was so proud of those kids, teaching them about the world of oceans, aeroplanes. The highlight of our year was the school concert. We had to have our rehearsals in an old corrugated hut in the middle of summer. It was so hot, some nearly fainted. Finally, the big night arrived, the one and only night the Pinkori pub closed. Some told corny jokes, did circus routines, recited poetry. But if you pulled that concert together without making fun of any of the kids or the 50 adults that were in the hall, you were number one. I ended up marrying a bloke out there. We had to live a fair way out of town, and I had to teach my own children. After all that discipline, they ended up a bunch of little outlaws, yearning for the wide open spaces and the call of the cattle yard. We'd start school at 7:30 every morning. Speed, accuracy, arithmetic tests. I tore up reams of untidy work and tried to keep a constant supply of children's literature in the bedroom bookcases. The afternoons were for School of the Air, craft, art, drama. The pets got to know the exact time of release and would come wandering up to the schoolhouse store just as the kids came whooping out with their newly acquired skills. I could hear them saying, A is for apple and goes, ah, ah, ah. B is for bat and ball and sounds b, 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 as the dogs' tails wagged in tune. The highlights of our year were the School of the Air Sports Day. I can't tell you the training that went into that. And the CWA Christmas party. I dressed the kids up as little angels. Old sheets for robes, fencing wire with mosquito net for wings. They all went away to boarding school. And to the pride of this bush teacher, some on to university. I thought my teaching days were over then. until one day one of the stockmen came in and said, "Would you teach me to read and write?" Well, I started all over again, reading Dick and Dora under the trees, putting up signs, saddle, car, sugar, all round the station. And do you know what? I think he's going to be my best pupil yet. And I'll tell you something. I wouldn't have missed it for the world.
Happy. There wasn't a pub in the West to compare with the Federal Palace Hotel. It had a real good feel to it, a real swing, and everyone loved going there. Always used to dress up in the evening, little dab of lipstick, heaps of perfume. Got to keep up a standard, you know. The guests liked it. They used to ask me how I started out in pubs. Well, I'll tell you. I guess it started 20 years ago when I was living in the mining town. Me husband shot through and left me with little Bobby, and he was only 4 at the time. So I had to go out and earn enough money for food and blankets in the winter. So I started taking in washing and ironing, until I figured out there's got to be an easier way to earn $1. So I found out there were lots of young women in town who were in the same situation as me. So I rented an old house down by the river, and we soon got ourselves organised. Of course, the hoi polloi in town used to say it was a house of ill repute, but that was a load of old rubbish. My customers used to hold it in the highest esteem. Anyway, when I'd earned enough money, I skipped town and took Bobby out west to make a fresh start. I landed a job as a barmaid at the Federal Palace, and that was that. I moved in with the fellow who owned the place and got it up and running proper for him. Just as well, because the grog got him soon enough. Honestly, he was like a kid in a lolly shop. I remember one day a customer come in and he said to me, "Where's Felsie today?" And I said, "No, he's not working in the bar today, mate. He's far too dirty for that. I got him working out in the kitchen instead." The summers out there were real hot. One day, Felsie hit upon the idea of moving his cot into the cold room with the veggies, and they never lasted too long after that. Still, Felsie said it was him or the veggies, so we had him canned after that. Felsie wound up getting real crook, liver, you know. So I took over the place proper. Honestly, you wouldn't have recognised the place. Coat of paint, barmaids, yardmen, looked fabulous. I even put a nice lounge out the back for the ladies with a playpen and a jukebox, because I knew what it was like getting left at home by myself at night. They say hard country breeds good people, and out there they were the best. Mind you, they were pretty wild at times. Used to ride their horses into the bar, swing off the rafters, that sort of thing. But you know, all I'd have to do is walk into the bar, clap me hands and say, "Enough's enough, fellas," and they'd settle down, good as gold soon enough. I did have ways of handling them if they looked like giving me any real trouble. A spot of Epsom salts in the stew, and you wouldn't see hide nor hair of them for days after that. But you know, I never did get to feeling guilty about doing things like that, because if there was one thing I couldn't stand, it was a fight. I remember one time there was a fair old brawl in the pub after a rodeo downtown. The coppers came in and they started beating up real bad on this poor little harmless jackaroo. So I flew in and pulled them off. And they charged me, rotten buggers. So I stood up in court and I said, "Not guilty, Your Honour. I did not stick a safety pin into the left cheek of Sergeant Quayle. It was into his right cheek, and it was his arse, not his face. We had weddings in my pub, and christenings. I used to polish the silver, borrow the flowers, do the place up real nice. I used to make the cake myself usually too, slice off a few bits for the kids out the back. You got to stick together out there, you know. I'd always end up with a mob on me hands at the end of the season when the work ran out. They'd come into town, drink their checks, and they wouldn't have any money left for food, silly buggers. Anyway, I couldn't bear to see them starve, so I'd give them a feed, and they'd end up doing odd jobs around the place to pay me back. I think my record might have been 9 yardmen one year. And then there were the pensioners. Poor old fellas, no one wanted them anymore when they were too old to work. I don't know, old dogs, children, and busted-ass stockmen. Still, if there's room in the heart, there's room in the house, I always said. And when they died, I'd see they got a decent burial, and I'd pack up their goods and chattels and send them to the next of kin. It was the least a woman could do. When I left out there, they gave me a real proper send-off down the Shire Hall. They had an afternoon tea, and they even had a dance with a band and all. You know, it was sort of funny seeing all them grown men crying, and they kept thanking me. But you know, really, I was the one who should have been thanking them.
Because when you went nursing out bush, absolutely nothing fazed you. There wasn't any vet. Not that that mattered, mind you, because there usually wasn't any doctor either. You just rolled up your sleeves and got in and did the best job that you could. Anything from stitching up horses to delivering babies. I first decided to go nursing when I was around 18 years of age. My parents were staunch Presbyterians, and they raised me up on a steady diet of John Flynn and the Flying Doctor Service. Marvellous, romantic stuff, of course. A few months out bush and I was brought firmly back to reality. For when Australia was first pioneered, loneliness and the fear of being lost or injured must have been the worst fear of all. Thousands of men, women and children were beaten by the sheer vastness of the Australian bush and died. No one came when they were sick. Nothing happened. They were simply forced to take their chances, and all too often they lost. Great tracts of the continent were considered taboo for women and children. And as settlement pushed further and further out, that fact was underlined by the sight of station graveyards dotted across the countryside. Well, they posted me to a small bush community up north. It was a fairly typical place, with the majority of residents being Aboriginal. The remainder were made up of pastoralists, miners, itinerants and their families. I suppose bush nursing's a funny sort of a job. You ended up being a jack of all trades, a sort of cross between surgeon and midwife, of course, psychiatrist, physiotherapist, paediatrician, marriage guidance counsellor, social welfare worker, Mike Tyson and Mother Teresa. I had a few bad frights when I was there. Once, when a man in the DTs tried to break in, he spent the whole night clawing at the boards and trying to kick down the doors. Another time, I remember, I rather foolishly intervened in a domestic. I ended up on the receiving end of that one as well. However, you try and put those times behind you and think of all the good things that happened. There were plenty of those, I'm glad to say. I once saved a man's leg by splinting it between a couple of broom handles. I did a few heart starts, a few torchlight deliveries. I even became a wizard bribing the kids. If they came in for their inoculations, I'd give them a bag of lollies. Night flights used to be pretty dangerous. You really had to convince the voice over the radio that a life or death situation existed. Took some convincing sometimes. Once there was a child who was dying. The plane was due at midnight, and as there wasn't any lighting, we'd organised Kero flares and the cars to put their headlights out on the airstrip. We're all there, waiting and watching as the plane was coming closer and closer. I was holding the little girl, but she died in my arms just before the plane landed. She was still so pretty and so warm when I took her over. The doctor never forgave himself. Well, I'm married now, and my husband and I run the local store and service station. But it's true what they say, that you never stop nursing. Just the other day I was called to another little girl. She drowned in the bath. I was down on the floor working on her furiously while everyone was standing around just not knowing what to do. I'd just about given up. All of a sudden she gave a cough and a splutter and blew this enormous bubble. I can honestly tell you it was one of the best things that's ever happened to me.
But when you came back, everything started to change. No more water, no more dreaming. Maybe there's things that are easier to forget. Blood on the wattle, poison in the flower, bad, terrible stories. But there's something you got to remember, because I was right there from the beginning. I was all of them. Old Mary, old Lubra, house girl at the homestead, mother of your stockman, mother of your children, and mother of the half-caste children. Other times you bring me from the station, mission, that place where they teach me, gentle Jesus, meek and mild. Then you bring me out the station, wash the dishes, rake the leaves, and I know it's my tribal land, but I never say a word, boss, never say a word. You remember me now, hey? I remember the letter you wrote home saying, no white woman here, hard to keep, good men. But I was the dark secret, black velvet, soft and warm. And then you'd say, the longer you're here, the whiter they get. Plenty of you fathered my children, little yellow fella, half-caste. And then you'd say, don't worry, matey, no need to call him son. Some of you stuck around and treated me good. But the government men, they punish you bad for that. They take away the children, put them in a home, make me howl like a dingo, cry for my child. But you got to learn how to run real fast if you want to stick together. If they catch you, you end up in jail. Living there on the station, the missus, she got no friends. She get real lonely. So when the men go with the cattle, I take her away and show them my country, where to find the water, the lily roots and yams. You remember the day we chased that old goanna and you ran under your skirt? We laughed so hard, we nearly died. She good missus too. She teach us to read and write, give us that radio to listen to that country music, get us pretty dresses from that mail order shop. We make her flowers for her birthday, bring her tea and toast, and tell her we never want to be anywhere else. We don't want to work anywhere else. I cry when they send me to that mission. 7 years since I see my mother, but nobody else ever treated me that good. We worked the cattle too, up until 1930. Half of the stockmen in the Kimberley were women. A friend of ours, Dame Mary Jurek, she's here tonight. Dame Mary, you remember that stockman Biddy? She had the pipe, stock whip, and R.M. Williams trousers. Dame Mary, you put it in that book, didn't you? You say, it was probably the heyday of black women who had never before or since enjoyed such status or sense of importance. Small-boned and timid seeming, They soon proved themselves to have more endurance and intelligence than the men in the cattle game. That's all over now. All past, all gone. Plenty things wrong, plenty deaths, and plenty shame. But there are plenty good things that happen too. Plenty things to build on. Maybe we got to look forwards now. This is a big country and we can share it. But this is a story of 200 years. Us Aboriginal women want to tell our stories too. The stories of 40,000 years. Stories for our land, Australia. Stories for all of us to know and share.
The boss came into the station to meet me, and here I am, standing in the middle of nowhere with my bags, and he walked straight past me. Then he turns around and he said, "Excuse me, miss, I've come here to meet a young fellow down." I said, "What's his name, mate?" And he said, he looked aghast. So I said, "Well, can I still have the job?" He said, "But what can you do?" I said, "Well, I have willing hands and a willing heart." A couple of years later, he told me that I was the best man he'd ever had. But you all knew me out there. I was the woman who worked a man's job, daggy old clothes, big hat, boots. You all made me earn your respect the hard way, didn't you? I never really held it against you, though. Probably would have done the same if I'd been a bloke. A few of you, and I think you know who you were, well, you never wanted to give me a go. You tried everything you could to stop me, humiliate me. Well, I got there in the end. Did it tough, but I always got there in the end. I was Edna Jessup, boss drover. At the age of 23, I took over a droving trip after my father became sick. And with a couple of Aboriginal stockmen, I brought 1,500 bullocks. Nancy Bird Walton flew the mail runs through the thunderstorms and dust, mostly seat-of-your-pants stuff too. And half the time when I'd step out of the plane, they'd say, "My God, it's a woman." I was the shearer's cook, up at 4 in the morning, stoking up the fire for the steak and eggs. I was the skinny little rouseabout in a dirty pink shirt, rolling the wool out on the board. I was Fiona Darcy, travelling hawker, taking my truck around the rodeos, a cougar's shirts and jeans, even some toys for the kids. I'm lost on the road now, but I wouldn't change places for the world. I was Toots Hulzimer, driving the semis, ploughing through the bull dust on the Cape York runs. I changed the tires, prodded the cattle, blew the horn. And yeah, that was living. I was the wife of the dogger, the rabbit trapper, the roo shooter, fruit picker, and the mailman. When our man was sick or on the grog, I went out and did the job for them. The boss never knew. When we scraped enough together for a block of our own, I went out and chopped posts to build the yard. 20 trees a day was my limit. Couldn't move when I got home. But you want to see my yards. I was Fanny Jones, station mistress, waving the train through in the middle of the night. I was Mrs. Alloway, telephonist on the Nearly Exchange. I was there for the fires and the floods, all night at the switchboard, keeping you linked to the outside world. And I was Tracy Mahu at Jillaroo. Remember the day the horse threw me in the steel cattle yards and that piece of angle iron cut off my ear? And you drove me to hospital, me holding the damn thing in my hands. And 3 days later, the doctor came and he gave me a mirror, and all I saw was a half-shaved head, an ear stained purple from the antiseptic, and swollen 3 times its size. And I said, "Oh God, I look like Mickey Mouse." And I was Robin Miller, the Sugarbird lady, the nurse who flew her own little Mooney to the outback Aboriginal communities to give the children their Sabin inoculations, to prevent them from getting polio. Those were tough days in the Pilbara and the Kimberley. And when my husband died, when my father passed away, I was the one who chose to stay and keep the dreams alive. I was Margaret Webb of Mount Ruddock Station in the Northern Territory. When my husband died, there really was no decision to make because he left me so much to live for. So many ideals. I suppose when I got on that bus and came to Bush all those years ago, I really did it for myself. I love the land, I love the life, I love the freedom and the challenge of it. In the end, I came to realize that it belonged as much to me as it did to any man. And we opened it up, side by side.
Hello everyone. I'm a bushwoman too. I'm a bushwoman of today. And I don't know about you, but I had a lump in my throat listening to their stories of years ago. It was a tough country then, wasn't it? And you know something? In many ways, it still is a tough country today. Not that I'm complaining, because I wouldn't swap my outback life with anyone or anything. But I think I'm a modern pioneer. My husband and I are partners. And I can see there are many of you out there just like us, not all living on cattle stations, but whether you're from a small Kimberley or Territory town, from a mining settlement or a remote Aboriginal community, whether you've come here for your job or your husband's job, a short time or a long time, you, me, we, all of us are working hard to build this special part of Australia, an exciting part, and we are all important. When I first arrived in the outback, my life wasn't very much different from that of the missus before the war. I was a young bride too, and we didn't have very much in the way of material things, but we did have masses of hope, enthusiasm and love, big hearts, and most important of all, the ability and the strength to work hard. Those early years weren't easy, but they were happy. Nearest town was 300 miles away, and our dreadful road became impassable every year with the first rains of the wet season. Once a month the mail plane landed, and how we loved that Canellans pilot who brought not only our mail but newspapers and perishables. Oh, those fresh letters. No house, we had to build that, just a caravan and tarp. Basic machinery, an old truck, brand new Toyota, and cattle country with great potential. Every year when we sent the bullocks away to the meatworks and the cheque came back, I got used to the money being spent on fences, bores, windmills, even bulls. Never enough left for new clothing for the children or me, but we didn't need much really. And we managed to save for a good holiday every second year when we would take the children to the beach and to catch up with the relations. It's only recently, really, that we don't have to rely on Radio Australia for the news, because now we have television and telephone via the satellite. Oh, the thrill of being able to phone family and friends and to place orders without having to battle with the sunspots and static of the two-way. I had my children in the bush too, and yes, I taught them right through primary school with the help of School of the Air. Can you imagine me, a grown woman, going back to primary school for 18 years, the time from when my eldest started and my youngest finished? And you know, for ages I looked forward to turning that schoolroom into my own room. But when our youngest left for boarding school, it left such a void in our lives that all those plans just flew out the window, and I've left our schoolroom exactly as it always was. The memories mean so much. And my friends in the local towns, they find it difficult at times. Some of them have never lived anywhere but in big cities, take a while to settle in, and some never settle in. They miss their parents and the grannies and grandpas and the friends they've left behind. They find it so expensive, those airfares for annual holidays. And women married to government men, it's hard for them too, because they're never sure how long they're going to be here. They've just turned house into home, established a garden, settled the children into school, made new friends, and they're transferred south. Friendships made and lost, so many good ones cemented in these remote towns. It's really sad saying goodbye, then turning around and welcoming new faces and starting all over again. And how do you tell a woman new in town that it's over 40 degrees for weeks on end? You can't even leave the baby in the car while you run into the post office. The children will all get prickly heat. The electricity bills will be 3 times normal, and all the water in the world won't help keep up a good lawn. In October and November, tempers fray and we become lethargic. They don't call it the silly season for nothing. People in the south just don't understand. They think we exaggerate. How can we explain to them that weevils in the wheat bix aren't that bad, and the geckos on the wall and frogs in the loo are all a part of life in the Kimberley? They just think we're all troppo. But how many of them have ever camped out in a secret gorge, or fished for barra in a remote watering hole, or trekked through the bungle bungles, experienced a Kimberley sunset, or a social life that includes the whole family, or slept under the stars in the wide open spaces with not another human being around for miles and miles and miles? Yes, your values do change, and the things that were once important don't seem at all important anymore. I've learned to compromise. I'm wife, mother, nurse, teacher, cook, confidant, shoulder to cry on, bookkeeper, gardener, and at times I'm stockman, handyman and mechanic. Yes, and I can even peg a fence line. And I am underpaid and I don't have a union to turn to. But we're here now tonight, yesterday and tomorrow. We're here together beside the men. And we're working together as a team to build this wonderful country of ours. Just try to imagine our great-great-grandchildren, or the woman who in another 100 years stands beneath that beautiful old boab. No doubt they will say, how did they do it? How did they survive? Yes, we are pioneers too, and proud of it. By attending. And to enhance your memories of this remarkable evening at Carlton Hill, we are now going to offer for you articles from each of the pioneer women. To do that, it's my great pleasure to introduce to you 2 Territory top auctioneers from Elders Pastoral, widely experienced and highly skilled. Please welcome Mr. Peter Moffat and Mr. Bruce Cameron, our auctioneers for this evening.
Bit of silence, please. Zip up, bear up, but don't. I can't read the rest of this. I need my glasses. Their crutches and brandy will lead to all the things most people convalescing would never dream of. He sounds good on a warm night tonight, Peter. How late you work, Bruce? It's back to you to see what you can get. Including the nurses. Where are the nurses from the Kununurra Hospital? Where are they? Where are they? Where are they? No! Where are the nurses? Down the back there? $20 a bit. What? 20 bit, 20 bit, 20 bit. Now the lady in the red shirt. 30, 35, 35 back, 40 bit, 40 bit, 40 bit, 5, 25, 50 bit. What's doing over this side of the room? Obviously no nurses. What? 50 bit. You must be, sir. 180, 15, 20, 225, 225, let's say 25, you're both out, 30, 240 here, 5, 245.
It's probably the first
first time that a megastar has had to walk up. Everybody is very anxious tonight to see and share what Dame Edna is going to perform. Dame Edna entertains us all. So would you please sit down and then everybody will be able to see. This is welcome, Dame Edna.
Let's hear you say coo-ee. Isn't that beautiful? And what a historic occasion it is here tonight. You know, darlings, I'm a very, very nervous megastar in your midst this evening, a very nervous woman. You know, I'm more nervous than I would be on the stage of the Sydney Opera House in front of a nicely dressed audience. I am. Lucky coincidence, there's a little woman down here wearing her oldest frock of the world. But isn't my dress gorgeous? Isn't it? I can feel women's eyes boring into this lovely dress of mine. There'll be pathetic replicas of this frock all over Connemara in a day or two. Women copy me slavishly. You know, in Sydney, little Maggie Tabra was squeezing into a dress like this. This would make a lovely sleeve for Maggie, wouldn't it? No. I mean that caringly, I do. But isn't it a beautiful night, and isn't it a special occasion? Your Excellencies, yes, they're here. Dame Mary Durack, ladies and gentlemen, and kiddies and people of the Australian outback. You know, I'm sick of being a megastar in many ways. I'm sick of mingling with people like Shirley MacLaine and Meryl Streep and Barbara Streisand and Rolf Harris. I am. Roots they are. It's lovely, but I miss being an ordinary housewife. You know, I am fundamentally, you look at me now and you see a gorgeous, glittering, almost an unreal creature of ethereal beauty. And yet, fundamentally, I'm an ordinary Melbourne housewife. That seems a long way away to many of you, doesn't it? But and I miss the duties of a housewife. I miss little things, I suppose, like fishing for bent teaspoons in the waste disposal. I miss emptying a little kitty litter tray. I miss defrosting the fridge, running across the kitchen with a little tray of cold water, trying to empty it into the sink in time. I miss running a skewer around the edge of the old wooden ironing board. Most of all, I miss sniffing my Wet-Ex. I do. I miss sniffing the Wet-Ex to see if it's fresh or not. You know, it's funny, but I think I can smell a stale old Wet-Ex over here. Oh, I think it's you, as a matter of fact. Oh, yucky. Did you wear one tonight, by any chance? It's just that oh, look at these beautiful gladdies, too. I think we'll have to do something rather exciting with those later, don't you, ladies? I do. A little moment, a sacred little moment called Gladdy time. And I didn't bring a certain person with me tonight. I refer to my friend and bridesmaid, Madge also.
Oh, I wish you brought Madge.
No.
I love Madge.
None of your false sympathy, please. She couldn't come, and I didn't want her to come because, you know, this would be too exciting for her, and there are too many raunchy cowboys and stockmen here for Madge. She'd be a little bit too excited. She's in a permanent state of arousal, my bridesmaid. However, I hope this is suitable for kiddies. I'll try to make it so. He was the first, and this will interest little David Bradley, who's a doctor. My husband was the first recipient of a prostate transplant in the world. The doctors warned me. They said there's a big danger your husband's organ might be rejected. I said he ought to be pretty used to that by now. But I said it caringly and lovingly. I did. Oh, the little young ones are laughing too. They don't know what they're laughing about, but they're laughing for sheer happiness, to be in the presence of a happy woman, boys. I'm a very happy woman. I radiate happiness as a kind of vibration that I give off. But there it is, poor old Norm. It was a terrible thing. You know, he donated most of his vital organs to institutions all over the world. When I got to his bedside, he was just a dent in the pillow. Norm had been globally recycled. Globally recycled. A few months before my husband passed away, the matron came to his bedside and she gave him a little card to fill in. And he ticked off liver, kidneys, brains, tripe, and sweetbreads. He thought it was the hospital menu. He did. He didn't know that it was his organ donor's card. He didn't. He's always loved awful, my husband. Poor old Norm. But there it is. It's lovely to hear this laughter coming, because it's a priceless thing, laughter. Do you know what I call it? Vitamin L for laughter. And you know, ladies, we use more little muscles laughing than we do in almost anything else that we do. We do, girls. Those little L muscles that we use. And my husband and I used to love to laugh. We did. We were always playing jokes on each other. I remember we played a marvellous joke on my husband shortly before he passed away on April Fool's Day. We pretended to Norm that he was going to be discharged from the hospital. We did. The matron packed his little case, and he could see her doing it in a corner of the mirror above his page-turning machine. He's had, Dame Mary, this will interest you, he's had the Thornbirds open at the same page for the last 12 years. Who hasn't? Anyway, they got Norm. They got Norm down to the front of the hospital in his lovely dressing gown, and I had an ambulance ticking over. And just as my husband was about to fall gratefully into the ambulance, it whizzed off down the driveway. He fell flat on his face in the gravel. And all the doctors and nurses leant out the hospital window and said, "April Fool!" I wish Norm could have laughed at that as we have tonight. Kununurra Echo. If they can afford it. It's called Dame Edna's Ode to the West. Thank you for such a magnificent welcome. A night filled with music and mirth. From on high where the stars are all sprinkled like talcum. One glittering star's come to earth. I'm so proud to be standing up here on this stage, since I've hit Carlton Hill like a comet. Tonight we've written a sentence in history's page, and I hope that our kiddies learn from it. For tonight we remember the pioneer days, and the women with pickaxe and plough. The men have had more than their fair share of praise. Now it's time that we girls took a bow. They taught me when I was 10. It was big macho men who braved the outback before I was born. But now the man from Snowy River doesn't cause me to quiver. I find him, frankly, a bit of a yawn. I love the men of the Ord, but I'm just slightly bored by all those cowboys and stockmen and co. And I just almost fancy I'd like to see Clancy disappear up his own overflow. I'm sorry. I mean that any relations or descendants of Clancy, I mean that in a very nice way. Tonight, we've heard a splendid poem about the women of the West. And I must say I've shed a few nostalgic tears. But why not spare a thought at least for the women of the East? For in a spooky way, we too were pioneers. You Western girls have braved the bushfire and the drought, the salties and the flies and the King Browns. There's Susan Bradley! So spare a kindly thought for those women trapped and caught in crowded supermarket and polluted city. For by far their greatest plight is that they can't be here tonight. So the women of the East deserve our pity. But I don't care in the least if you come from north, south or east, or if you're black or white, or even if you're alien. The highlight of my career is simply being here. So say cooey if you're proud to be Australian. Good night, Potter!
I have another round for Dame Edna while I collect myself. Well done. It's a fascinating thing. I'm only doing a few songs because I'm on my own this evening. The band isn't here, and one of the things that is very much important to my writing and music is strength of family. And you can't have a family without a woman. It's a funny thing, that. And I'm pretty partial to women. I've liked them for quite some time. And this first tune's about a place over in the eastern states in southern Queensland that fell in a heap simply because the family that used to own and love the place left it. And it's amazing what strength of family can do. This is a song about a period of our history that's gone forever, and I refer to that part of our past as an age of grace. Well, I knew an old man, he told a tale of when he was a young blood and not old and frail. Did he tell me of one grand place, a station and a homestead in an age of grace? He spoke of daylight when 20 men would leave the main yards, their mops to tend, and in evening fires burned bright down in the quarters, laughter in the night. It was an age of grace and it's passed by, an age of grace. I wonder why time rolls on, fades to gray. Say goodbye to yesterday. And in the big house where plans went down, they thought about their people when they talked about their pounds. Everybody had their own place, part of the picture in an age of grace. It was an age of grace and it's passed by, an age of grace. I wonder why time rolls on and fades to gray. Say goodbye to yesterday. Well, I went by there, it's not far from home. Rubble and ashes, the garden overgrown, ghosts around me, soul of the place It's only survivors of an age of grace. It was an age of grace and it's past by.